This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
City and union leaders respond to an alarming report on the city's pension fund. Tonight, I'm Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by a number of guests to talk about the city's situation with the pension fund. Kemp Conrad, Memphis City Council. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
George Little, CAO, Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Memphis. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Eric.
Thomas Malone is President of the Memphis Firefighters Union. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for your invite.
And Bill Dries, Senior Reporter with the Memphis Daily News. So the report, the full report is on our site, some other sites out there, found from PricewaterhouseCoopers, an accounting firm, the office in Atlanta, found that the city's pension fund, around $700 million underfunded, and is on, they conclude, an unsustainable path. And so I'll start with the basic question and let each of you respond. I'll start with you, Mr. Malone. Do you see that pension fund that, you know, is for your firefighters and others, is it on an unsustainable path?
We don't think so. There's only one issue that we have found as a negative. Now, let me preface my remarks by saying, until we get all the data that they used and are able to, we've hired an outside agency, just as the report suggests, to get professional advice. Do not use this as anything as substantiable. Get outside professional advice, and that's what we're going to do as soon as we get all the information that they used to compile this study.
Okay. Kemp, your reaction to the report?
This report is nothing new. This has been out there for 4 or 5 years now. It's just the next report. We have a whole conference room full of them down at City Hall. It's a challenge that gets worse every year when we don't address the problem. Even if it's a $700 million issue, and there's another $700 million issue coming with the healthcare unfunded liability. This is not unique to Memphis. A lot of cities and states have gone through this. I believe 40 states have made changes in the plan. Our current budget, as it's currently constructed, is dishonest. It's dishonest to taxpayers, it's dishonest to our employees, and it's dishonest to retirees who expect for this pension to be there. Without change, it's not going to. One of the main reasons is the city has underfunded the plan by $50 to $80 million each year over the last 4 years. I think that we need to make some reasonable plan changes that are reasonable in order so there is a retirement for people. Okay. And so we need to get off the debate of, you know, whether the report's right or wrong. Every year we file what we call our CAFR, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, similar to what a public company files. It's what bondholders use when they're making investment decisions on whether to buy our debt. This is fact. It's mathematics. It's been an issue. It's why the union agreed to some of the changes we made 2 years ago. We need to get the discussion, collaborate, working together in a way that's fair to everybody to fix this challenge once and for all, so we can move on to other priorities as a city.
And we're going to talk, there are recommendations that other people have made about changes to the plan, but I want to get sort of the baseline, where everyone's coming at this report. CAO Little, do you all agree with at least the conclusion that the pension fund is on an unsustainable path?
We do agree with that conclusion. We recognize that we have a shortfall in terms of the funding level. When we talk in terms of the lack of sustainability, we're talking about assuring that pensions are there for our current retirees. We want to assure that there are pensions there for our current employees. And by the way, we want to be able to continue to attract and retain employees. I think one of the other key things in terms of the whole issue of sustainability, however, is how we pay for the pension plan, whatever we settle on. Councilman Conrad made mention of the unfunded liability. On an annual basis right now, we're looking at a gap of anywhere from $60 to $80 million that we're currently not funding. And so one of the challenges, regardless of, even if we choose to do nothing, will be filling that gap, because the state of Tennessee has demonstrated that they're willing to step in with municipalities. It's not just Memphis. We talked about the national picture. There are 12 other jurisdictions here in the state that they're looking at. Conceivably, they could come to us and say, Memphis, make your annual contributions. And that could impact taxes, service levels, and that could affect our current employees if we're forced to fully fund.
And getting into, we'll come back to the state, a bunch of really good issues there. We'll come back to the state's potential involvement in this. But one thing that the plan, it suggests, and one thing that's happened nationally in other states, and I believe even the state of Tennessee, is that going from, I guess, what's called a defined benefit, that when you retire, you're guaranteed a certain amount of money through the city pension fund or any other pension fund, to a defined contribution. The city, in this case, will contribute a certain amount every year, kind of like more companies are going to 401k type plans where you're not guaranteed any payout, but you're guaranteed a certain amount of money will be put in there every year. Do you look at that, Mr. Mullen, and really dislike that prospect that there could be, if these numbers, and I know it's a big if, but if these numbers prove to be correct and there is this big unfunded liability, that there's a choice, a really hard choice that has to be made that really changes the way benefits are paid out, at least to future retirees and maybe even current retirees?
You know, we've looked at this, and again, until we get all the information,
Sure.
I'm going off the cuff on what we have. And when you look at the numbers, the problem that we got is there are a lot of factors factored in this report that are simply not true. We do not get an average of a 5% pay increase every year. Matter of fact, the last 4 years, we've gotten zero. I think the last 5% was in 08, and prior to that, it was in 1998 or 99. So that factors in that part. The mortality rate that they used. All of a sudden, 2 years ago, in 2010, there was no disclaimers in here. In 2011, this disclaimer started. We changed the mortality rate the last 2 years, which inflated the unfunded liability by over $30 million. So, and as far as if there's something wrong, certainly when we get the numbers and we get to look at everything, we'll be more than happy. I'm a recipient of that pension fund. So obviously if it's wrong, but the only thing that's wrong right now that we can see is, as Councilman Conrad just stated, the city simply has underfunded. They are paying less.
So how would they do more? I mean, would you like to see them cut services? Would you like to see the city increase taxes? I mean, we just went through a tax increase. To get to that, as you just said, you know, if the city is underfunding that fund, how do they make up that gap?
I mean, that's something that we'd have to sit down with the city. But if you look at it, the underfunding just started in 2008. We were 104.5% funded.
Right, which was in the report too. So there was this.
That's correct. Then the market goes south 2 years, and the city started drastically putting less. In the 80s, and I was here in the 80s, the city was putting in 13%, sometimes more than 13%. Right. So, as Councilman said, I don't disagree. It's simple arithmetic. But the thing about it is we think it gets a little bit more when you start comparing a defined contribution to a defined benefit. Then we've got a more concern from the fire side, and that's all I know about is the fire side. And we're afraid that we're going to have a revolving door of employees leaving, taking their contributions and going to, hypothetically, where someone's giving a signing bonus or something. We gave a signing bonus a few years ago.
All right. But you had a couple
I'd like to make 3 points.
Sure.
So I think a lot of times we kind of get distractions as opposed to focusing on the real issue, the mortality rate. Okay, a $30 million difference. So maybe it's $640 million, not $670 million. It's still a problem. On the 5%, we both know, Tommy, that that's more than just pay raises. You've got step increases, which you guys have artfully negotiated in there. You've got promotions that happen over time. So that 5% isn't just for pay increases. It's for, if you look at historical averages over time, that's about what people do through promotions, through the step increases, and through pay raises. And I'm sure y'all are going to keep lobbying for pay increases every year.
We don't get step increases.
Well, police does.
I said I'm only talking about fire.
So police, which is the big part of it. So police and fire. Good point. Thank you. And so that's on the 5%. So again, those are two issues. It's still a big challenge. On the underfunded piece, 2008 happened. Before I was on the council, obviously the school issue came up when that was taken away. I have every year during the budget process brought this up and pointed out this unfunded, that the city has not been doing that. But now we're at a point now after 4 years, and this is the cost of inaction. when you let these problems go on. If we do fully fund, and if the state does say you've got to do this, it's $100 million. So it is what it is. We are where we are now, unfortunately, because we haven't had the courage to make the changes. We haven't worked together enough. So the question is, do you reduce benefits do employees contribute more? Do you raise taxes?
Which we did.
Do you raise taxes $1? We're at $3.40. Do you raise it $1? That's a huge increase. Or do you drastically cut city services? Even if we transitioned everybody over to the new plan, whatever that may be, it would still be a $40 million per year over the next 30 years to take care of the $700 million problem.
Yeah.
So those are the numbers. They're big numbers. And so we need to start talking about how we're going to work together to solve the problem, not if there is a problem.
Do you at this point see a little, I mean, there are a number of recommendations for different types of plan. And again, going to either, grandfathering in the current retirees, such as Mr. Malone and others, and then moving future retirees into a 401k type of plan, or even going backwards and saying the people who've gotten this pension benefit, it's going to change because there's just not enough money there. Do you all have any preferences of the various solutions or suggestions that have been laid out in this?
Well, let me, I guess, frame it this
Sure.
way. First, we're not talking about changing the pension benefits to current retirees. There is a whole other discussion to be had about other pension employee benefits, healthcare and the like, but that's for another day. So we're not talking about making any changes with current retirees whatsoever. Second, I think you really have two sets of questions here. The first set of questions is, if you accept that the current plan is unsustainable, then what could you change to? And there's a range of options. They include the defined contribution, which would be the 401k. They're hybrid plans, which, by the way, because we don't pay into Social Security, would provide some minimum level of support that other workers may have through Social Security. It could even include, at another extreme, if you look at the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, they have much lower benefit levels. That might be another option. That
is putting employees into that
into
plan.
the state system, and that would be a larger pool. There are ups and downs with all those choices, and clearly just trying to make the annual required contribution is another choice, albeit with an $80 million price tag. So that's one set. The second set of issues is, or would consist of, do you start with new hires only if you're going to make changes?
Right.
Do you do it with non-vested employees? For instance, about a year ago with police, fire, and other unions, we made some changes in terms of employee contributions, even for the non-vested employees. That did help to narrow the gap somewhat. So I do want to commend the unions for the work and discussions that we've done in the past.
Plus we reduce some benefits.
Plus there was a reduction in benefits. And then the third choice would be to bring all of our active employees, both vested and non-vested, into the system. If you simply do the math, and based on the Price Waterhouse report, that's the particular option or set of options, regardless of the plan type that you go to, that narrows the gap the most immediately.
Because they do lay some plans out, some scenarios that are very sustainable. I mean, they lay, I think, 6 different options out. We won't go through all of them. I thought you outlined them very well. But this is not an intractable and not solvable problem from a math point of view. But let me get Bill in here. So go ahead, Bill.
Should there be a solution here, though, that has a specific plan for public safety employees that distinguishes them and their needs and conditions from other city employees?
Well, I would say that all of the options are on the table, and I think as we look at issues such as the attraction and retention of employees, I think we do have to look at a range of factors. Perhaps making a distinction for public safety employees could be one additional distinction. We're in a comment period now from employees, from the general citizenry, from the business community. We're briefing council members one-on-one. We're going to have a full briefing for council on the PwC report. And so all of these factors will be brought together in a final decision.
Do you see a different...
I absolutely think we need a different plan for public safety, for police and fire. I mean, what they do every day is categorically different than people that are working in offices. So they absolutely need a different plan.
Thomas, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously, we are a little bit different. I'm listening and I've read the report. We've not had a chance to actually digest all of these factors that this report used. But from a simple term, the only factor that we can see, and I'm open to anything, as both of these gentlemen know, Fire helped orchestrate this last increase with the employees paying more and the newer employees taking less benefit. But I understand what Councilman Conrad's saying about, well, we have a problem, blah. Number one, we think there's a huge inflation of the number, number one. Number two, from the standpoint of the unfunded liability, we could fix the unfunded liability today and we could hire somebody tomorrow and we have another. The unfunded liability will be here to infinity. It is not going away. If any negatives happen in the pension fund, it goes on the unfunded liability side. In the system we have right now, then you add a 7.5% cost to it because that's the suggested figure that would be earned in the system. So you look, this all came about, we had unfunded liability in 2008. It was 104.5% funded, but we had an unfunded liability. Then the market went out. The market plays about, I'm guessing 75% in this system. We have the employee's contribution, the employer contribution, and the market, and that's it. That's the only three-legged stool that we have to fund this mechanism we call the pension fund. So to say that it's unsustainable, obviously, I don't think the city of Memphis, the citizens realize what a good deal they've been getting. 6%, that just increased in 2010. It was 5%. That's less than what we would be paying for Social Security if we were on Social Security.
Let me move on to an issue I think you've both mentioned, which is when you go to a 401k type plan, and I hadn't thought about this honestly until I read the Price Waterhouse report, that right now, I guess if you're going to see these benefits that are in the existing pension plan, you've got to stay a certain number of years, or else you don't really you're not vested, you don't get anything. Versus a 401k plan, pretty much the average plan, most plans, after 1, 2, 3, 4 years, you start building up a certain amount of retirement benefit that you can take with you. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as an administrator, as a person who's managing all these people, as an employer? Is that attractive? Because basically, on the one hand, somebody could work for 5 years and take those benefits and go. But on the other hand, you might have people who would come in and be willing to work at the city for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, get some benefits for that time, and then move on. It creates a different dynamic in terms of hiring and turnover.
It does from a portability standpoint, and clearly the current workforce is more likely to change jobs. We don't see that as much in the public sector. In the city of Memphis, whether it's police and fire, or even our general service employees, tend not to leave as much.
Right.
But that said, there are risks for the employee as far as a 401k program. Nationally, when you look public and private sector, most employees, in terms of their 401ks, particularly with the loss in value in the last few years, are at very low levels in terms of providing retirement income. And so I do think as an administrator, we have some responsibility to look at those issues, inform council of those issues when we make the recommendation. Because again, attraction and retention is a major piece.
Let me talk about that, Kim. Same question of, be ugly here for a second. The stereotypical notion that real anti-government folks have that, somehow, people are just sticking around, they're burnt out, but they're just sticking around until they get their pension payout. Not fire. Let's stay away from fire and put Mr. Malone on the spot. But that kind of generic notion that some people have that they're sticking around just for the pension. Do you see that as a positive dynamic to move away from that? You've got to stay X number of years, even if you're burnt out, even if you want to move on. People like different challenges. They want to do different things, but they're sticking around maybe in a clerical position or a finance position or something like that just to get that benefit. Do you see that portability being important?
Well, I want to correct one thing I said when Bill asked me a question. I didn't mean that public safety should be in a different plan. I think their benefits should be structured differently. So I just want to point that out, such as minimum retirement age. I think there should be lower than general employees.
Right.
Like that. Like anything, there are pros and cons to a defined contribution versus a defined benefit. I'm going into this, frankly, agnostic as to the solution. We're going to be getting numbers on all the different pieces of it. One thing that is good about a defined contribution plan, I think, is the portability. I think one of the things that makes our country great is competition. And frankly, if people have the option of if someone is on the job 15 years and they've got to stick it out 5 more to get a pension or whatever example you want to use, I think it forces us to be a better employer. if we are competing more in the marketplace, and if we do know people can leave with a 401k.
All right.
And so I think it would force us to do some things better potentially. Now there are downsides too. So this is what we're going
Right.
to be wrestling with. But I
Right.
think so.
Yeah, go ahead and
Let
respond to
me
that
say
question.
this. I think Councilman Conrad's in the ballpark. He's just not at the bat yet. The issue here from public safety is, I'm going to use hypothetical figures here.
Sure.
We're looking in fire of taking around roughly $100,000 to train a firefighter. In 3.5 years, we train a firefighter to the highest level in the state, plus under the new guidelines we have now, they have to be a paramedic within that time. Now, let's just use the simple arithmetic that Alaska used. They had a 5-year vest in their defined contribution system. In 2006, they started it. In 2011, they had mass exodus. Now, let's just focus on our paramedics. The city here of Memphis is a workload. They make tremendous numbers of calls.
Right.
A lot of work here. Now, let's take Nashville. We always get compared to Nashville or Louisville. They need paramedics, and we're in a defined contribution. The simple thing they could do is post a little bonus down there. They make close to the same money. They get Social Security and pension there. The city pays almost 16% into their pension. What do you think our people are going to do, these 3, 4, 5-year people that we have?
Yeah.
They're going to go to the best attraction that comes their way because it's portable. They're going to take this money and move on down. I talked to a company last night. They have a profit sharing. They had an employee quit, highly talented employee. They quit their job and said, I can get another job because I've got talent, and they needed money to buy a house. They took their profit sharing, which is the same thing
Right.
like a 401k. That's one of the concerns that we have in this union from the standpoint of public safety.
Okay. Bill, 5 minutes left.
The mayor talked about this somewhat during outside of the council committee sessions this week, George, and he basically said that in terms of a percentage, we're at 6% now that we're doing. We had been at 5%, as you said. But he said the problem with pegging a percentage to start discussions at is that we don't really have a handle on the base amount. It keeps growing. Was his basic assumption. So as a step in this process, do we first have to fix the amount or find a way to stabilize the basic amount that we're talking about overall?
Well, for the purposes of discussion, we're assuming that where we are in terms of both the city and employee contributions would stay the same. I mean, all of the projections that PwC has done has been based on that. That too could be the subject for further refinement, but and other jurisdictions have done that. They've increased the share of local contribution, employee contribution. Right now, we're not contemplating that. But again, as Councilman Conrad said, we're agnostic on the particular solution, and if that becomes part of it, we're open to it.
But let me add this. When the employees went up 0.5% and we drug it over 3 years, it's been 2 years now, I think, and the city at that time said that they would look at increasing their contributions. There was discussion there, and we were going to put together an oversight committee, a pension oversight committee that has never met in 2 years. So if we're going to really realize that there is a problem, then we have to roll up our sleeves and get together just like we did. But you can't keep coming to the employee time and time and saying, you got to raise your contribution or you got to cut your benefit, and the city stays status quo. We survey 12 cities our size, anywhere from 600 to 750,000 people. And there's the closest thing to the city's contribution is Denver, Colorado at 8%. Everybody else is in double figures. And that's, if you look at Nashville, they pay almost 16%. If you look at some of these other cities. Now, we have one of the most conservative systems in the country. I've been retired almost 10 years in this system. The largest pay increase I've received is 1%. So everybody else has built-in COLAs, they have all these things, and that's where a lot of their problem went.
All right, Kim, just a couple minutes left.
I would imagine in some of these cities that you mentioned Social Security, aren't the employees paying more too? Because they'd be paying 6% into Social Security, and then they're probably paying another
They don't pay in the
6 to 8%. So, no, not here, but in other cities. Or other people that are paying Social Security, then a 401k. Most people are, employees are putting in more than the 8% that city employees are putting in. Right?
Maybe so in some of them.
Okay.
I mean, that would be fair to say yes.
Okay.
Well, let me just point out whether we're talking about increased city contributions in terms of the annual required contribution, whether it's increased contributions as far as our share of the retirement. We're talking about net additional expenditures or net additional revenues or some combination thereof. And that means jobs. That means taxes. And so there is a cost, even to doing nothing within the actual system. And I think if there's no other takeaway from this, what we've got to look at is minimizing the burden on the taxpayers while maximizing the benefits for our employees. But there will be a cost regardless of the choice that we make.
I mean, right now,
go
under the current framework, there's a $100 million annual gap. So either the employees are going to need to do more, there's going to have to be more revenue, or services will have to be cut. Those are our three options. And I think what is going to happen at the state level, not just for Memphis, but the other 11 or 12 communities out there, is there's probably going to be legislation that's coming that's going to force us to ramp up quickly to make that annual required contribution that our actuaries, who base this stuff on fact, tell us we have to do to fund the plan so it's there for our employees.
30 seconds left.
Real
I'll let you
quick,
get the last
every
word.
single plan that's in this study, the numbers that we've been able to run, the cheapest one would be 600 million, all the way up to 100 million. If you took that money, put it in the current plan, we're slick. We're 85% funded.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more in the coming weeks. Thank you for joining us. Good night.